And we are back. It's a special Saturday edition. We had some technical difficulties, but all that matters is we are here. So, Nibs, we got episode 9 of Catch and Connor. How we feeling?
Man, we feeling damn good, baby.
Hmm.
I appreciate you, Jack. You've been running shit. I'm lazy as fuck, so I appreciate you coming in on a Saturday. We both had some shit to do yesterday, so we had to come in and do this on Saturday, and we got some shit
Hmm.
for the people out there, bro. We got a list from us. Since we are the authority in all things boxing around here. We figure we give everybody our top tens, and I don't think anybody should be disagree with us.
Nah, yeah. I mean, we always see the big outlets, ESPN, Ring Magazine. Those are all well and cool, but like you said, these are the official pound for pound list for not only us, but I think for the whole sport. So the cool thing is we got Felix chefing up some graphics. We'll have those posted afterwards too. But first, before we get into the pound for pound, we had a fight. So we're feeling good right now, but we weren't feeling great last Saturday because our guy Jermell Charlo had a tough go against Canelo Alvarez. But before that, we'll go into a bright spot of the card. We had our guy, Felix's guy, Elijah Garcia, was in a hell of a fight against Armando Resendez, who's a certified. So just two certified young guys looking to become a contender, and Elijah had a fantastic knockout in statement. So what were your thoughts on just the matchup? Because he was matched really tough, but also just how he was able to perform and obviously maybe win the night also.
Bro, that was a huge statement fight, and the reason I say that is because you're fighting a guy who just came off, you know, pretty much a one-sided beatdown of Jared Hurd, bro. This was a guy who used to be a champion. A lot of people respected. A lot of people thought he was gonna go in and walk over, you know, Resendez. So the fact that he came in and was able to stop him, durable guy, good power, and he was able to pretty much walk through most of his punches. We say this a lot because he's a friend of the channel. He's a friend of the ITR altogether. Felix is in love with the kid. We always say we can't wait to see what's next with him. I legitimately can't wait to see what this kid does. I think personally we're gonna have him on our top 10 pound for
Mhm.
pound list in the next couple of years. I think he's that good. I think as long as he doesn't fuck it up, as long as he stays focused, once he gets a little money, he doesn't start, acting funny. As long as he keeps the hunger he has now down the line, there's really nothing you can't do with this kid. He's got talent and he's got a good head on his shoulders and he's got a good team, which is so important. You know what I mean? Because a lot of these kids, they get into the limelight. You got a whole bunch of people telling you this, that, and the third. You got people not really in your corner, You know what I'm saying? And then, you get that bag. It's real hard to stay dedicated
Mhm.
when you're worth $1 million. You know what I mean? So I hope that once he gets to that level, he keeps the same hunger and drive he has now. Because if he does, I'm telling you, the boys are going to be lights out. Watch out for him now. And he was very impressive.
Yeah, like you said, he's mature beyond his years. Like he has just the temperament of a vet. He seems like he's been in the game a long time for a young kid, only 20 years old. And for me, it ain't even just that he's winning these fights, because just winning against these opponents would be good enough for me to show he's a legit guy moving up. But it's how he's been able to win these fights. Like you said, Resendez has all the confidence in the world. He was coming off a huge win against Jared Hurd, but the way Elijah was able to, the way he stays cool in the pocket is something that I really, really like too. Where Resendez was throwing some heat in there. Don't get me wrong. Like he came, like you were saying before, he was coming to fight, and he did come to fight. And the way Elijah was able to kind of pick his shots perfectly, and the way he was able to just get the job done, I think just speaks to how just his IQ and his ability to contend already. I think for a young guy like that, some people want to see them slowly progress, but I think that he's ready for those bigger names, especially at a 160 division, which is kind of wide open right now. I just think that the way he's able to, in these fights, adjust in real time is really, really good. And that speaks to, as I said, his ability, but also his corner having their head on their shoulders, feeding him the right information between rounds, too.
And I think you hit it on it. You nailed it right there, right? Um, he's in a division that's ripe for the taking. You know what I mean? Most of the guys at the top are kind of waiting on each other. You know, there's really only a handful of guys that you really have to be worried about. If you're Elijah Garcia at this point, I think he's right there, he should be fighting guys in or around the top 10 from this point forward. Maybe this time next year he's in a title fight, which I would favor him in. Right now, there's really nobody in the division where I'm like, he's too much for Elijah Garcia right now. Outside of maybe Triple G, but even that, as old as he is, who knows? So it'd be good to see what the kid can do. Unless Jermell comes down to 160 instead of 154 like he's planning, that might be a little bit too much to chew off right off the bat. But realistically, I mean, at 160, I don't see anybody really, having their way with him. I think he's ready for the big time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I can't wait to see. As you said, middleweight's kind of looking for that next star, and it seems like he's taking full advantage of these opportunities. Looks like PBC's really behind him too, because you wouldn't put a kid like this on a Tank Davis, Ryan Garcia pay-per-view and a Canelo pay-per-view if you didn't think he was goods either. And not only did they put him on those opportunities, but he's also delivered on those opportunities. So I do think I'm excited to see just not only just the future, but also the immediate future. Like his next fight, I think he's, as you said, right there. And I think this is a perfect opportunity for him to maybe he wants to get a belt before he's 21. And I think that's definitely a possibility.
You cooking today, Jack. Look, I want people out there to understand what you just said. Not only did he get on two of the biggest cards, arguably the two biggest cards of the year, right? He delivered, right? How many times do guys get on these undercards? They get co-main event level and they put in stinkers. I ain't saying no names, Lubin, but if you get on these cards, bro, people expect you to show out. They expect fireworks. They're paying their money for it. These are big shows. A bad performance can really hurt your marketability in your career more than a loss. And sometimes, in these cases where people are like, well, I don't want to watch that dude. He was garbage, on the Canelo card or the Tate card or, whoever's big, Bud and Spence. If, for all those guys stunk it up, people were like, I don't want to watch that dude. He stunk. So, being able to not only go in and be on these cards, but showing out. Hey, man. Hats off to him.
That's a fact. And we'll go to now the next undercard fight, which is another guy who kind of stole the show and really became, I think, Elijah. And we'll get to the main event too. Clearly, it was a big winner in that fight. But Elijah and then Mario Barrios also were the two big winners of the weekend. If I'm not mistaken, I think we had two guys. It might have been on this show. I'm not sure. A different show maybe, that were telling everyone that he was a live dog in this fight. We were picking him to win outright. And I was picking Mario to win from the jump, but I didn't see it kind of going the way it did. I mean, Ugas was competitive early a bit, but once Mario started landing that jab, Ugas's eyes started closing. He started really putting his hands together and put a real beating on Ugas. And as someone who's always fighter first, I would be okay with Ugas kind of calling it a career at this point. He's had good fights. He's made a lot of money, but I just think with that eye and just these back-to-back performances, it's going to be tough to kind of come back from. But what do you think about our boy Barrios just proving us right and really having a great performance and making himself a real name at 147?
First off, real quick to your point, if Ugas does retire, there's no shame in it. He doesn't have anything to prove anymore. There are so many fighters out there who would kill to have the career he's had and make the money he's made. With that being said, not only did we pick it, we picked it the way it went, right? We said, look, Ugas, I think that's, we both said it, that Spence fight took more out of him than people may think. I think that, being dominated later in that fight the way he was, and, let's face it, he was a little bit longer in the tooth when he fought Pacquiao. So it wasn't like, Ugas is a spring chicken. I think Mario Barrios, he had a couple of losses in a row, albeit to Tank and one time, so can you really give him shit about that? No, he fought, arguably one of the best fighters out right now and one of the best fighters in the welterweight division at that time. Most people argued that he was the best welterweight in the division at one point. So, losing back-to-back, but, his third fight, he came in, he got a good win. I said, you know what? I think he's on his way up. I think he was getting acclimated to the welterweight division. He's had a couple fights now at welterweight, after moving up from 140. I think Ugas is on his way out. Barrios proved it. I mean, he made us look like geniuses, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, that jab was surgical. I mean, what he did to Ugas's eye, good lord, you know. And they could have stopped it a couple of rounds before that if they really wanted to. I understand giving Ugas, you know, all the chances to go out on his shield, but I think Mario Barrios had a really good game plan. He, executed it to perfection. He caught Ugas at a really good time. And I think this is going to propel him now that he's got a strap, right? I think this is going to propel him into bigger fights where he can make some decent money. I don't know that I would favor him against any of the other champions or interim champions at this point, but kudos to him for putting himself in a position to at least even be considered to get those fights.
Yeah, but one thing we know about Barrios is that he's one of those guys that he does really want all the smoke too. Like he's not one of these guys who just says it and doesn't back it up. He's already signed on the dotted line to fight in a row. Basically, he fought Tank. He lost to Tank. He fought Keith Thurman right after that. Fought Giovanni Santiago in a kind of a stay busy fight, and then he fought Ugas after that. I know he's already even mentioned a Boots fight, which I know a lot of people Boots would be the consensus to win that fight, but we've been waiting for Boots to get an opponent. A lot of these guys, Keith Thurman or these other guys, haven't been willing to step up. So I think it is refreshing to see Barrios willing to step up and take these fights. And as you said, even these fights he might not be picked in, he was still the underdog against Ugas, and we already saw how that turned out. I think Boots is a whole different animal, but I got to give him credit for even stepping up and be willing to take that. And going back to another point I wanted to make is that I think Ishmael Salas didn't look great in this fight as Ugas's trainer. I know that him and Bob Santos used to work together a few years ago, and they kind of split, and they've had some beef since then. And I think from what I saw was you saw one coach that was able to handle the beef and just still stick to the game plan. Like Santos always does a great job of hyping up his guys, but also giving him instruction and kind of having that fine line of not giving him too much of either one, just the perfect amount of information you need. And I think we saw Salas kind of take it personal a bit in a fight where if he wasn't fighting going against a Bob Santos fighter, maybe he takes Ugas out of that fight. But I think he might have not wanted to give Santos the satisfaction of winning over him because they did have the beef. And I think that the only person that hurt was Ugas at the end of the day because Salas wasn't in there taking the punches. Ugas wasn't. Ugas is a hell of a warrior. The Spence fight should have been stopped before it was. This fight should have been stopped. And Ugas is never going to stop fighting. But those are the guys who it's most important to stop those guys because you need to protect those guys from themselves. And I just felt Salas failed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Ugas is one of those guys. He's not going to sit in the corner and just be like, okay, go ahead and stop it. He's like, nah, I want to fight. What the fuck are you talking about? So my eyes closed. So the fuck what? I got two eyes. You know what I mean? Let me go out there and do my thing, right? And I kind of feel like, at least it looked that way. I looked like they kind of overlooked Barrios a little bit. Like maybe they looked at him like he was their just bounce back stepping stone fight to get him back into title contention or one of those bigger boots type fights, right? And you have to realize with a guy like Barrios, like you said, he's always a live dog. He's never going to come in and just lay down. He in his fight against Keith Thurman, his eye was all blown the fuck up. He never stopped fighting though. Never stopped coming forward. He never stopped his game plan. Didn't change just because his eye was fucked up. That's another thing, right? Too that you have to respect because even if Mario Barrios moves up and gets his boost fight and loses or gets knocked out, what's the worst? That's the worst that can happen. But we're still going, okay, Mario Barrios is still a dude who's going to come in there and fight, right? He's not going to just try to make it through the fight. He's actually actively trying to win. Most people didn't think he had a chance against Tank, and he proved himself. He got stopped, but he was in there trying to win that fight.
Yeah. And he was winning early on, too. He won a lot of those early rounds, and that was one of Tank's, besides the Isaac Cruz fight, and that was because of the injury. But take away the injury, I think that's probably the toughest fight Tank's had his whole career was Barrios.
Facts. And, again, this dude was a champion. It's not like, he's a bum who moved up. He was a champion who moved up. And again, when you consider that, people always look at look at losses and go, oh well, you must not be that great. When your losses come against the best in the division, right, or some of the top guys in the division, nobody can really hold that against you, bro. I mean, Keith Thurman's his only loss is to Manny Pacquiao.
Hmm.
So you lost to a guy, whose only loss is against an all-time great Hall of Famer.
Yeah, but even that was a close fight, and he's the one guy. We'll get into the pound for pound, so we'll talk about even Tank Davis, who obviously beat Barrios. That win's aging really well for him, but to me, it also showed that Keith Thurman is still that dude at 147 too. Don't get me wrong; he might not be the prime Keith Thurman with the ponytail who fought Sean Porter and Danny Garcia and those guys, but we saw what he did to Barrios, and Barrios, as you said, give him all the credit in the world. He kept going. He even hurt Thurman to the body at one point, but that was a fight Thurman won probably at least 10 rounds. And looking back now against the Ugas, who people thought Ugas and Thurman were kind of on the same level, but it just shows that Keith Thurman is, and that's why I want to see him back in the damn ring at some point so we can actually see him fight so we don't have to talk about these hypotheticals. But to me, it showed that he is still up there. And even like the fight that I would love to see would be Boots and Keith Thurman. I'd like to see Barrios fight like Cody Crowley, Mean Machine, Butayev, even Stanionis. Someone like that would be perfect match fights for those guys. But I would pick Boots to beat Keith. Don't get me wrong, but the way Keith uses his feet, his educated jab, those kind of things, if he's in his bag, he could make for a hell of a fight against any of these guys still. And I think that his win over Barrios proved that.
I think a healthy, in shape Keith Thurman could give Boots enough problems to make other guys more enticed to fight Boots.
Mm-hmm.
You feel me? I think Boots beats him. I agree with you. But I think he could give Boots enough problem, maybe even knock him down. Because let's not forget, Keith Thurman got some power. He's
Mm-hmm.
not a bitch, and he is not pillow fisted. This boy can bang. So I think Keith Thurman could give Boots enough problems to where other guys go, well, hold on, wait a minute. Because a lot of people look at Keith Thurman as washed up or done because he's older, hasn't fought in a while. They go, hey, this dude ain't fought in a minute. He gave Boots the business, still lost. Hey, maybe I can get in there and do some things, right? You look at the guy that, I mean, he completely whitewashed him, but he gave him problems, right? The kid who was running around the ring the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
He gave him a style that he had never seen before. Throw that in there with a kid who can actually bang. You give Boots some issues, right? So I think a lot of people want to see that, and I pay good money to see Thurman and Boots. To be honest with
Yeah, nah, for sure. And then the one other thing with the Barrios fight is that he is now the WBC interim champion. And if Bod does indeed, which we all think he probably moves up to 54 or even 68, who knows, but he'll probably won't fight at 147 anymore. And if he doesn't, that means Barrios will become the full welterweight champion. So, which was a pretty cool moment for him, too. He's now a two-time champion. He was the regular champion at 140 for the WBA, but he's now a full-time, legit WBC champion at welterweight.
and he earned it the hard way,
Mm-hmm.
right? He again, Ugas, even though we think he's on the decline, is a guy, right? He's a guy he's 2 fights removed from being a champ, and beating Manny Pacquiao while we're at it. So, you have to take that into consideration. Uh, you know, and I said this, when I went in on the other show, I forget the name of it. Those other guys on IGR. When I was talking with Felix and Ray, I said, hey, look, bro. Yeah, I think Elijah Garcia was the best of the night, but I think the biggest win was Barrios. I said,
Mm-hmm.
because it's the biggest come up, right? He was on this card. Nobody expected him to win. He gets a strap, and on this biggest stage. I'm trying to tell you that was the biggest come up of the night.
Yeah, no, I got no complaints with that. I would agree with that for sure. It'll be cool, interesting to see who Barrios matches up with next because I think, as we said, he doesn't duck any smoke, so I'm not doubting that he's going to be in a big fight coming up. But the next fight is an interesting fight. There's still a lot of talk about the decision, but we won't spend too much time on this fight. But Erickson Lubin, Jesus Ramos. So a fight that we thought was going to be an entertaining fight ended up being kind of the opposite. And I'm not someone to normally say this is a boring fight, but it was a fight that lacked action, to say the least. The casual fans, I'm sure, were doing exactly what Nibs is doing right now. That's a good representation of what most casual, even some hardcore fans are probably feeling like they're in that fight. To me, I thought Ramos probably did edge the fight 7-5, but I honestly don't really have a problem with Lubin winning the decision. I just think that there were some swing rounds early, and when you lose like the last 4 or 5 rounds of the fight, it makes it hard for you to win the fight. So I think both guys have an argument to win, but I wouldn't call it a robbery. But either way, I think it's a weird fight because Lubin picks up a huge win for him, but I think that it's met with a lot of people kind of side eyeing it, and I'm not sure what it's going to lead to next for him. But what were your thoughts on, I guess, just the decision and just the fight or the lack of a fight maybe that we did have in the co-main event?
I think this was I think both guys lost.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that is because they didn't take advantage of. We just talked about this. Elijah Garcia, Mario Barrios took full advantage of their platform. Lubin did not, and I expected Lubin and Ramos, to be honest with you, neither one of them. I expected so. I thought, and I said this. I said, look, this might be the fight of the night. This might be the big. I was expecting the most fireworks. This is going to be, knockdown, drag out. I thought Ramos actually won the fight. But I'll say this. I didn't give a shit at the when it was over with. I said, okay, well, Ruben won. I can see that too, right? Like I saw both sides of it. We were talking on, the shop, and Ray mentioned Lubin did what he had to get a dub, after his last performance. Just he got a dub so they can move up. And I said, yeah, but that's not what you do when you're on a Canelo co-main event. You don't just get through and get a dub. You are supposed to put on a show. You're supposed to make people remember you. The only reason people are going to remember this fight is because guys like us talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And just because of the decision, I think. Yeah, I think the decision is what's going to make this fight. And I don't even have a problem because if I had a 7-5 for Ramos, if you have 2 swing rounds mixed in at 7-5 Lubin, I can easily see. I just had a problem with, I think 9-3 Lubin was a bit too wide. But at the end of the day, when do we have a card where we see perfect judging? I think it sucks, but I guess it's something we're all used to at this point. There's always at least 1 or 2 cards that are a little off or a lot off.
I would have been okay with a draw, and I'm okay with a close win either way, no matter how you saw it. But yeah, having it 9-3 either way was ridiculous. As boring as the fight was, I don't think either one of them did enough to really out edge the other guy, unless again you're giving a lot of those close rounds to Lubin, right? So I mean, again, it's one of those things where I guess because it was so close and so boring, and neither one of these guys was doing shit. If you're just giving all the close rounds to Lubin, then yeah, I could see you having it 9-3. But I'll be honest with you, I don't think either one of them should be bragging about what they did in that fight at all. If I were Lubin, I wouldn't even be talking about that fight. I'd be like, hey, ask me about what's next so I can do something better, because that shit was just it was trash. And to be on it's not a fight that I would have expected to be on a pay-per-view from the 2 fighters that were in it. So that's why it was disappointing to me. Now again, if that's what those 2 guys were known for, right? Boxing, staying away from each other, this kind of stuff, then I would have looked at it different. But given who those fighters are and having watched both of them before, it was disappointing because I didn't get Ramos from Ramos. I didn't get Lubin from Lubin. I got 2 guys playing it safe, just trying to not get embarrassed.
Yeah. I wonder where both guys go from here too, because we have Tim Tszyu fighting Mendoza. We still got guys like Brian Castano, Fondora around this. So there's a lot of guys still at 154. I just wonder who's going to be matched up with who now going forward, because Lubin gets the win, but I think a lot of people still look at Ramos as a higher upside out of those 2. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because I'm still a fan of both guys. I want to see both guys in bigger fights going forward, but I think it might be harder to do that, like you said, based off the performances that we just saw.
What people are going to make the mistake with Lubin is they're going to make the mistake in thinking he's vulnerable because he's been stopped twice. Well, I mean, he got stopped against Charlo. He probably got caught cold. When he got knocked out the way he did, and then he got stopped against Fonfora, or I'm sorry, not Fonfora. What did I say? Fonfora? I don't know why I said that. But when he got stopped in his last fight, he was winning that fight. It wasn't like he was
Hmm.
getting his ass whipped. And even with that big ass second forehead,
Hmm.
he was actually still in there mixing it up, and he was in the fight. So I think but people will make the mistake. Oh well, he's been stopped twice. You know, let's take him because we can probably knock him out. If you're a Tim Tszyu kind of guy, I do think Tim Tszyu's on a different level than Lubin, but I would still pay to watch that fight though if Lubin shows up.
Yeah, it would be a good fight. And even I think for Ramos, this might even help him matchmaking wise too. I think that had he gone in and wiped out Lubin, I think he would have had a lot of people wondering, oh, this guy's the real deal. I don't know if I want to go in with him. And it might give guys more confidence to go in and fight a guy like Jesus where they wouldn't have before. So I think that if anything, it could help these guys. Even I was saying before, it might not, but it could help these guys both get opportunities. And it could lead to guys sleeping on a guy like Jesus Ramos now who not the greatest performance, but I still think as somebody who will be a world champion, it will be a really good guy at 54 and 60 for a long time too. It just wasn't his night last week.
I'm sorry, just falling asleep just thinking about it.
Yeah.
Right.
So we'll touch on the main event quickly, which is kind of the same vibe as the co-main event, honestly. For a card that started off with two bangers, we had two kind of lull fights. After that, we had Canelo Alvarez beat our guy Jermell Charlo by unanimous decision. But for me, I was just I wanted to see more out of Jermell. The one thing I had came on the show last week and said, okay, he might not be the better technical fighter. He might not carry the weight up well, but the one thing that he will do is he will fight and he will bite down. Problem is, we didn't really see too much of that. We're not in the ring, so it's hard for us to say. But to me, it kind of seemed like in the first round when Canelo was doing that thing where he was walking down, when he was kind of just even hitting him on the arms, I think Jermell felt that power and realized that, okay, this guy's a lot bigger. And some of the other things we talked about were just this guy's a lot bigger and stronger than anybody else who I've been in the ring with. And I just don't really have much for him. So I wish he had been more active. Even I think in the first 60 to 90 seconds of the fight, when neither guy threw a punch, that's when I realized it was Canelo's fight because we said Jermell, he was going to have to lead the dance. He was going to have to work the jab. He was going to have to stay in front of Canelo and just kind of not front run, but be on top of it in the fight and then kind of see what happens in the back half. But it seemed like he never gave himself those opportunities. So what were your thoughts on, I guess, just Canelo's win? Because I still was impressed with how he looked. It's tough to kind of gauge because he didn't have much going against him on the other side. But what do you think of just kind of the whole event?
I just want to say this again. When you get on the biggest stage and you're fighting one of the biggest stars, if not, he is the biggest draw in boxing. Canelo is. Fighting him is hitting a lot of them, right? When you get there, put your best on. Even if your best means you get knocked out, put your best on because people are going to remember that. Now, what we remember is Charlo bitched up and just kind of made it 12 rounds. I'm not saying that's fair, but it is what it is. As fans of the sport, we want to see you go out there and fight. Charlo wasn't fighting. He was, he was just skating. So, and I think he found out, he fucked around and found out early that Canelo's power is different. And, that boy kicks like a mule. You know what I mean? But we both picked him, and the reason I picked him one was to be different, but also because if you look at what Charlo does really well, I said if he can stay on that stick, put it in Canelo's face, box from the outside, keep that range. He had a good arm length advantage, right? But it didn't look that way. He's supposed to be the faster guy. Didn't look that way. Supposed to be the bigger guy. Definitely didn't happen, right? All of the things I said he was capable of doing, he didn't do. But I did say, hey, look, if he does this cat and mouse shit where he tries to lay on the ropes and be cute, he's gonna get his ass whipped. And that's exactly what happened. He tried to do this, cat and mouse shit on the ropes, try to be cute, and fucked around and found out that was just not something you can do against Canelo. You have to be offensively, defensive. Against Canelo. Look at what Floyd did.
Mhm.
He wasn't running, but he made Canelo miss enough, and then picked him apart when he came in, frustrated and winging punches. That's what you have to do. I thought Canelo could do it, and he sure the fuck did not. He just very disappointing. But to give credit to Canelo, I think Canelo looked in some of the best shape I've ever seen him. He was way more cut up than I've seen him in the last couple of fights. Last couple of fights, he just obviously Bivol, he looked a little bit more swole up because he's at 175, but he looked in some of his best shape. And I think this was just a way to him to tell people, hey, look, I'm still motherfucking Canelo. Yeah, I might have had a couple disappointing, last couple of fights, but I'm still fucking Canelo Alvarez, and I'm only 33 years old. Bring your ass on, and I'll take you down. And I really don't think this version of Canelo is beatable at 168.
Yeah, and even part of the reason, because I had still picked Canelo to win, but part of the reason I was giving Jermell a good shot was we just weren't sure what version of Canelo we were going to get, but we also weren't sure which version of Jermell we were going to get. I think we did see a combination of, he was saying just that he doesn't believe in ring rust, and I'm not even sure how much of it was ring rust, because I do think Canelo was just proved he was the better guy. He was even the faster guy. We thought Jermell might be faster. Was it because he added all the weight? I'm not sure, but Canelo was the faster guy, just a sharper guy in general, and just Jermell never had the power or anything to get Canelo's respect to stop him from walking him down either. So I think we saw just that we got weight classes for a reason too. I think that Jermell, even though as we said he looked like the bigger guy because he's the taller guy, there's a difference when you add on that weight when you're not used to. Yeah, he walks around at about 170 pounds normally, but when you're fighting at that weight, he's used to fighting 10, 15 pounds lighter. So when you're carrying that extra weight, the speed advantage people thought he might have had, actually he didn't have, and Canelo was the quicker guy. So I think those are kind of some of the things that lead into it. And then even for Canelo, it's hard for me to say that he's not unbeatable, because I still think that Benavidez and Morrell can both give him a run for his money. I think that the Benavidez fight, I see a better path of victory for Canelo, because I think Canelo can get underneath Benavidez and kind of rip that body and kind of time up his combinations. But I think Morrell, kind of like a Bivol, can use his boxing and use his legs from the outside. So, but I think Canelo's right back in the heat for those kind of fights. Before, I thought he might have been a half step down, but I think he is just as good as he was before, and he's probably the favorite in any of these fights, against Benavidez or Morrell. Not that I would pick him to win those fights, but he would be rightfully so the favorite in those fights. And I think that we've seen rumors that it might not be, but if Benavidez gets past Andrade, which, I mean, Boo Boo is my New England guy, so we'll talk about that another time. I'm not even so sure Benavidez does get past Boo Boo, so let's slow down. But if he does, there's no reason that Canelo and Benavidez shouldn't be the fight for Cinco de Mayo. Makes too much sense. Canelo's with PBC now. Benavidez would have wins over Plant and Andrade back to back. Two great wins for him, and I think his profile is just big enough now where that would be a massive fight. And I don't see a fight for Canelo that is even close to the same commercial success that a fight with Benavidez would be, especially on a Cinco de Mayo weekend in May.
As usual, you are right. However, I think the best fight for him is the Morrell fight. And the reason I say that is because I think Morrell might be the only person that can beat him right now. This version of Canelo is going to, I think, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody where I go, okay, yeah, they finna just whoop Canelo's ass. Not happening. If this version of Canelo is what shows up against Benavidez is in some trouble. Serious trouble. Because Canelo's body work, it makes guys forget to throw punches. You know what I mean? That's what people don't understand. He throws that body shot so well, even if it doesn't knock you down, it makes you go, well, shit, I don't want to throw my punches. Because if I throw mine and he hits me in that body again, I might just crawl up and cry. So people forget that one, but I think Morrell is a whole nother level of talent. Like that dude is special. He's only got 9 fights, and he's arguably the best guy in the division.
Mm-hmm.
That's telling you everything you need to know about who David Morrell is. I think David Morrell wipes the floor with Benavidez if they fight each other. I think he gives Canelo every bit of business Canelo can handle right now. If they were fighting right now, I'd have to favor Canelo. But I do think that he'll fight Benavidez next, and we'll see what version of Canelo shows up that night. But David Morrell, Jesus, I mean, it's hard to pick against that dude after what I've seen. But again, this version of Canelo, Jesus, man. I
Yeah,
mean, this version of Canelo, I think will back up to 175 and beat Beterbiev.
Mhm.
I don't know if he has what it takes to beat Bivol. Bivol, I think, just has his number, but I think he can beat Beterbiev.
I do too. I mean, before I wouldn't have said that, but we already saw Better BF go have a kind of a war with Anthony Yard. I think Canelo's a better version of Anthony Yard, so I think that be an interesting fight. I would love the Morrell fight, but I think that the problem for him is he's the absolute definition of being high risk and low reward. I think even if Canelo were to beat him, we would know that that would be a fantastic win. But most of the casual fans would say, I mean, you beat a guy with 9 fights. Like, okay, that's cool, but they wouldn't look as much into it. And I don't think the money is into that fight enough. I mean, trust me, if I could make one fight, that is without a doubt the one fight that I would make. I just think the problem is they'll look and say, okay, let's say maybe he would make 25 million to fight Morrell. Well, you could make 70 million to fight Benavidez. And I think that's where, especially if we're saying that's a more winnable fight for Canelo too, I think that just would make all the sense in the world. And it's boxing, so something will come up, and there could be some other fight that we don't anticipate just popping up out of nowhere. But as long as Benavidez handles business, and if he handles business, because I ain't counting my guy Boo Boo out yet. I'm not. I'm saying if he handles business, because we'll get into that fight another day too. But if he does, I just think that that's a home run fight, and it makes all the sense in the world. I think that Dana White or some of these other guys I'm talking about taking over a Mexican Independence Weekend or taking over Cinco de Mayo. So how do you stop that from happening? Is you put this fight out. You make Canelo and Benavidez for Cinco de Mayo weekend. The UFC, Bellator, nobody else is putting up a card to mess with that. And I just think that that speaks volumes at the end of the day, and that's the biggest fight you can make. I think that's probably the biggest fight you could make in boxing at this point right now, too. I think that's $1 million pay-per-view buy kind of fight.
Here's the biggest news from that, right? Canelo has all the options. Let's be real clear. We all want one of those fights to happen, right? Canelo could fight me next week, and 1 million people would watch it just because it's Canelo. You understand? But that's what people don't understand is that I think it was Bivol who blew the bag because he wanted to dictate the next the Canelo rematch. It's like, yeah, you might have beat him, but Canelo's still the A side, bro. Like, you don't make any money unless Canelo says, yeah, I'll fight you again. I think that's the thing right now where literally the sky's the limit for Canelo. Whatever fight he wants next, that's what we're gonna get.
Yeah, no, and even going back to the last comment I'll make on this, and we'll go to pound for pound quickly also, but the Benavidez fight is interesting because you made a good point just about Mike Tyson's always said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And the thing that I would probably favor Benavidez with, and I look in, Canelo looked awesome against Jermell, but he still only threw, I think, about 380 punches, which is something. That's made like about 30 punches around somewhere in that area. Well, a Benavidez is somebody who can throw 60, 70, 80 punches around. So the first question is Benavidez able to have that kind of output against a guy like Canelo? And if he is able to have an output against a guy like Canelo, is Canelo able to, or I guess maybe I should even rephrase that. Is he able to have the output like that? And does Canelo have to maybe hurt Benavidez early? And if he doesn't hurt Benavidez early, does he really even have a path to victory in the back half of the fight once Benavidez really starts to turn it on? So I guess what are your kind of thoughts on just that proposition that I have right there for the fight? Because that's, I think, what I'm really thinking about is Benavidez going to be able to use his regular volume? And if he does, I think that's what his path to victory could be later on, being the bigger, stronger, younger, faster guy.
Well, yeah, he'd have to have that overwhelming volume to beat Canelo or to even have a chance. I think the problem is he doesn't get there because, like I said before, Canelo hits hard enough to give you pause, right? So to your point, he doesn't have to throw 4, 5, 6, 7, 800, punches, a fight, because the punches that he is throwing are so efficient in what they're intended for, right? He can land 6 punches in a round to your 20, right? His 6 punches are going to do more for him than your 20 punches did for you. So let's be real, especially when you figure half of those are going to be jabs, right? So, but Canelo could get in there and land 2 body shots, and you go, oh shit,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like you look at the most recent fight with Charlo, you saw it after the second round. Charlo did not want those punches.
Mm-mm.
It, and it wasn't that he couldn't throw his punch. Canelo was there to be hit. Jermell could have fired off, but you saw him thinking, right? You saw him going, oh, well, if I throw this, you know, even when he almost went to throw something, it wasn't a feint. It was like, well, no, wait,
Mm-hmm.
because you're so afraid of what's coming back at you. And I think that's what people don't take into consideration when you're fighting a Canelo. He's going to give the other guy pause. I don't think I don't think anybody really is going to have a high output unless your name's Bivol. Like that dude. He's a master and boxer. In his weight class, he's bigger than Canelo. So he's taking his punches a different way. But the other thing you have to consider too is Canelo's got a pretty fucking good chin, bro.
Great chin. Mm-hmm.
So he's walking through a lot of these punches that would normally put most guys either on their back foot or on their knee. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Canelo's going to walk through a lot of those. And that's going to fuck you up here because it's going to like, well, shit, I hit this dude with a Sunday punch and then he hit me with 2 liver shots. You know what I mean? Like, what the fuck do I do with that?
Yeah, and the difference between the Bivol and Benavidez, because like I said, they both have even similar outputs, but just the feet of Bivol is the difference, where he has the educated feet to go in and out, and Benavidez will have the same, maybe a similar volume, but he's going to be right there for Canelo to counter the whole time. He's not going to be sticking the jab and then hopping in and out using that Eastern European style like the Usyk and the Beterbiev and the Bivol and those other guys use. So I think that it'll be interesting. I also think that people look at Benavidez as a big puncher. I think he can definitely punch, but I think it's more the accumulation that he has on guys. I think that Canelo is still, without a doubt, the stronger one punch guy. And I think that, I just said, Benavidez might land 6 or 7, but if he doesn't see that next one coming back at him, all it takes from Canelo could be one. And I think even him going down to the body on Benavidez is going to be an important thing in that fight. If he's able to go down to the body, take that energy, the youth out of Benavidez, I think he could make relatively easy work. But easier said than done. Even all these things I'm saying, Canelo hurt Benavidez to the body, or Benavidez just throw your hands. Both are easier said than done. And that's why we want to see this fight, because we're still not sure exactly what's going to go down. So it would be a huge, huge fight. And I really, really hope that we do get it in there.
Let's put it this way. If you look at Benavidez's resume, when was the last time you were legitimately afraid of or he was legitimately afraid of the punches coming at him from his opponent?
I don't think, David Lemieux could punch, but I don't think he was ever really worried about that still. But I'll tell you, if he's not worried about Demetrius Andrade's power, I think that Andrade's a boxer. He uses his feet a lot, but he can crack too. And I think he might even have better one punch power than Benavidez. Benavidez gets more knockouts because he's more committed to his offense. He lets his hands go a lot more. But I think that if he kind of goes in sleeping, just walking forward against Boo Boo, kind of like he did Ronald Gravel, that was a bunch of years ago now, but he got sat down on his way walking in. I think we could see a similar thing like that in his fight in a few weeks. And also clearly if he were to fight a guy like Canelo next year.
I just think it makes a difference, right? Like, Charlo, he had been in there with some guys who could bang, in his weight class, right? But again, taking those 168 punches, way different than the 154s. Benavidez has been in with guys who are willing, but aren't banging like Canelo does. Canelo's a whole different beast when it comes to power. You feel me? And all due respect to Caleb Plant has maybe a quarter of the power that Canelo has, and I'm being generous, right?
Yeah, Anthony Durrell won't like to hear that, but it's true at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Hey, look, there's levels to this game, though.
Mm-hmm.
And Durrell is past his prime, plus some.
Yeah.
But with all due respect to Durrell, his chin isn't David Benavidez's chin either.
Mm-mm.
You know what I mean? From what we know so far, and it's not even in the same atmosphere as Canelo's chin, right? Like we've seen. Canelo walked through Triple G's punches. You know what I mean? And Triple G is knocking people out with jabs. So again, there's levels to this game. Like you said, there's weight classes for a reason. There's levels for a reason too, right? You figure out real quickly when you fight Canelo if you're even in his level, real quick. And I think that was one thing that Charlo found out. He wasn't on Canelo's level, let alone weight class. You feel me? He wasn't on his level, and he realized it quickly. His entire corner was imploring him, please be more active. Be more. You heard it throughout the rounds, every round. Be more active. Throw your punches. Be first. And then he would immediately go out there and shell up and try to find the ropes and run. He did not want that smoke. You know, unless you really think you can knock Canelo out and you're going for that early, I don't see it going well for Benavidez, bro.
No.
And that's why I think Morrell is a better fight, because I think Morrell can actually stop Canelo, and I think he is on that Bivol Floyd Mayweather track as far as level of boxing, and I think but we'd have to find out what his chin looks like, because that'll get tested too. But Benavidez, man, I don't know. I don't think I just don't think it's as competitive as a fight as people think it would be.
No. And I think just like the Charlo fight is, all these things, these hypotheticals we're talking about, we'll find out pretty damn early in that fight. If we go in and the fight has the pace that Canelo and Charlo did right away, and Benavidez is kind of waiting and going shot for shot with Canelo, well, Canelo's going to win the fight and probably hurt Benavidez at some point. But if David comes out there, and I was saying the same thing about Jermell last week, so you're never too sure until a guy gets in there. But I would believe that just David being just even that much bigger than Jermell, being a natural 168, having the hand speed advantage over Canelo, I would think that he would be more willing to throw his hands in there, just being a bigger, stronger guy. But as I said, it's easy for me to say that from here because I'm not going to be stepping in the ring, and we won't know that until they're in the ring. So I think by about round 2 or 3, we're going to know, okay, we're in for a fight, or we'll know, okay, this is going to be going the same way as this last few fights.
Look at both of their fights against Plant. You saw the difference, right? Plant was way more willing to engage with Benavidez than he was, especially later on. Like and Caleb Plant is nobody's bitch. That's one thing you'll never be able to say about Caleb Plant. Caleb Plant not only wants to smoke, but he comes to fight.
Even inside and outside the ring too. Inside the ring, outside the ring, no matter where, for sure. Jermell Charlo knows about that.
Right. So. He's got heart and balls of steel. No one's ever gonna question that. His fight with Canelo, his fight versus Benavidez, totally different outcomes. In the way that he approached fighting each guy. Right. That's what I want people to understand. You're not gonna get the same Benavidez that you got against Caleb Plant. It's just not gonna go that way.
Yeah, you won't. But I also think, to go to your point, I'm going to agree with you, but also spin it a different way. That you're right. We won't see that same Benavidez because I also think we'll see a much better version of Benavidez. I think even the problems I'm having with my guy Boo Boo fighting Benavidez is I think Boo Boo's got a good shot to beat Benavidez, but I think he would have had a much better shot had he fought him before Plant did. Because those early rounds against Plant, Plant was winning a lot of those rounds. It was up 4-1 on my scorecard, but Benavidez was able to adjust in the ring. It didn't take him a fight or two down the line. He was able to say, okay, I need to win every single round of the rest of this fight to win. And he did that, and he kind of was able to really pull away. So I just think Benavidez is getting better and better each fight. That I think for as long as this fight gets delayed more, I think it even increases his chances of winning because he's going to learn more. In this Andre fight, he's going to learn a lot more too, and I think it will only help him. Different style than against the Canelo, but I think just the more times you're in with high-level guys like that, I think the better he'll be served for a big fight.
And him and Boo Boo are about the same size, right?
Yeah, I mean, Boo Boo's, No, I mean, he started at 54, so I think he's definitely the less natural of a 68, but he's a tall and long guy. He's 6'1". I think he's got a 70-something inch arm reach. So, he's not a small guy moving up. Yeah, he fits in pretty good at the weight, too. And he can really crack, too, so that's a fight that I definitely can't wait for because he's definitely live.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'1". David's 6'2". So they're about the same size. That's what I meant. Not physically. I mean, Boo Boo, like you said, he's been fighting at the lower weight class. So I think this is his third fight at 168, if I'm not
Yeah, it's
mistaken.
actually it's his second fight because he fought Nicholson earlier this year, so it's his second fight. Because even he had a lot of fights at 60, so I think he's filled out. I think he fills out better because Jermell did the jump from 54 right to 60, where it's not like Boo Boo's done that. Boo Boo's naturally taken the time. It's been years. It's been since HBO that he was at 154, so he's taken the time to fill out more naturally
Yeah.
at the weight too.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boo Boo gives you a good fight. Like you're gonna fuck around and find out real quick whether David is even ready for a
Mm-hmm.
Canelo fight with Boo Boo. I think a lot of people aren't taking it serious. I think a lot of people think because he had some problems with Nicholson, and then we saw what Mbili did to Nicholson. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, good lord! Now that's a whole
Mm-hmm.
nother beast that we're not even gonna talk about this show because that
Mm-hmm.
dude,
Yeah.
wow.
Uh-huh.
But I mean, I've never been as thoroughly impressed with. I mean, anyway, but but to say that that same guy gave Boo Boo some problems, right? So people are gonna think, oh well, Davis is gonna walk through this guy, and it's like, well, I don't know, man. Boo Boo's not used to losing,
Mm-mm.
and he
He
knows how
hasn't
to win.
lost. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And what was the last time he lost? Was an amateur years ago?
Yeah, would have been the Olympics. Uh-huh. And he was an Olympian,
Right.
which even proves the point even more. Olympian, multi-division world champion. Doesn't have the greatest of resumes, but skills pay the bills. And one thing he has is that anybody who's been around Boo Boo in his camp, because it's easy for the fans to say, oh, Boo Boo sucks, doo-doo, Android, all this kind of shit. But anybody who's been in the ring with him, sparring, fighting, or has been around him in camp, say, listen, this guy is the real deal. He's 35 now, so the reflexes are going to start to kind of slow down at some point. But if you guys are sleeping on him, if you're picking Benavidez to win, I'm cool with that because I rightfully see that Benavidez is the favorite. But if people are thinking they're going to go in there and that Andrade has no shot, it's Benavidez is a lock to fight Canelo next year. You're tripping, and you might find out that not only is Benavidez not ready for Canelo, he wasn't even ready for Boo Boo Andrade at the end of the day.
And here's the thing. I wouldn't say it's a trap fight, but it could be
Oh, it could definitely
because
be a chop fight.
you're Benavidez. You're thinking this dude had a problem with Nicholson. We saw what Mbili did to him. He's never really been the big name guy. Yada yada yada. Right? He's new to the division, so you think you can walk right through him. And real shit. While my light is falling, don't pay any attention to that. Did not happen. All right. Then you're thinking to yourself, I'm already looking at this paycheck from Canelo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm already looking at this, I'm already looking at September, or Cinco de Mayo. I'm already looking at all that. And then here comes a guy who's got legit talent. Like you said, a lot of these kids who have that Olympic pedigree, whether they won, lost, or draw at the Olympics, they've done very well of recent in the pros. And that pedigree means something. I mean, look at Deontay Wilder. He won a bronze medal. I think that bronze medal has carried him to where he is now, right? And you see, that. I mean, that right hand helps, but Boo Boo's got that pedigree. He's a guy that's not just going to come in there and get his ass whooped. Plus, he can make adjustments in ring, which you don't see a lot of guys doing. A lot of guys have a singular game plan and they stick to it when all hell be damned. So I think Boo Boo's got a chance, bro.
Yeah, no, and I guess at this point, because I'm going to be kind of leaving a little bit, we'll save the pound for pound because I really want to go into and have a whole thing. So we'll probably save that for the next show. But even just to kind of finish touching on those things, as you were saying, the one thing with Boo Boo is that he starts off on fire in the early rounds, and I fully expect him to come out on fire against David in those early rounds. Thing I wonder is once he gets the lead, he tends to kind of coast a bit and kind of just box from the outside and fight in spurts after that. That's what we saw with Nicholson. And even though he won every single round against Nicholson, and that's when you get people, as you were saying, to say, oh, he made that fight maybe a little tougher than he should have. He could have pulled away and knocked him out. And you can't afford to do those things against David Benavidez. But it also goes two ways because Benavidez has fought. Plant's a very slick guy too, but I think Andrade brings a different level of slickness to him where Plant is still very slick, but Plant's a lot more fundamental. He has the jab, he has the hook, he has a lot of just very traditional things where it looks wild with Boo Boo sometimes, and people don't realize how skilled he is because he does wing the wild shots. He does kind of have to do, but those things are that much harder to, and you don't realize it's. I mean, you can get sparring partners for guys like Benavidez that can kind of implement Caleb Plant style. They're not going to be Caleb Plant by any means, but they can kind of do some of the things he does. I'll be damned if he found somebody who's even can even mimic a bit of what Boo Boo Andre does, which that's why some people say, oh, he could get caught with an uppercut when he does this or that, but no one's done it yet. And just the way he does, he masters these things. Even I was watching some of his old fights the other day, and Sergio Mora on the broadcast was just saying that it looks wild when Boo Boo kind of does these winging shots or when he kind of dips his head and does these things, but they're all calculated and he all does them at the exact times he knows. So he might wing a crazy shot with his right hand, but it's because he's coming back with the left right after that, or it's because he's then getting his head off the center line. He's not doing these things. He's not doing these things to kind of leave himself wide open or anything like that. So I just think that that's going to be a hell of a matchup, and I don't think David's been in with someone like that. So I think that I really can't wait to see how it plays out.
Yeah, he's doing those things because he can.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me of, a young Prince Nassim Hamed, right? People used to always say, oh, well, I do this to him, I do that to him because he's throwing punches from places you shouldn't be throwing punches. He's moving his head the way, it's just, there's no way you should be able to do that thing. Then they got in the ring with him and he knocks him the fuck out, with a punch from his knees. So, people fuck around and find out that this guy's doing it that way because he can. He's that talented, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to be able to hit him because he's been practicing for that, right? Everybody thinks they can do this one thing to you. They get in the ring and find out, oh, it's not that easy.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody had the same shit they were talking about fighting Floyd, right? They get in there. How many of them did it? None. You look at Canelo. People say, oh, well, I can do this to Canelo. There's only been 2 people that have solidly beat Canelo. I know a lot of people think Triple G beat him, but how many people get in the ring with him and then fuck around and find out? So I think you're right. Andre's one of those dudes where everybody keeps saying I should be able to do this to him, and he's got that many losses. So, you know what I mean? There it is, bro.
Yeah, and you can talk about it. I see Michelle saying that our voices are cutting in and out. So we're going to be wrapping up in a few seconds anyways. It's the last thing I'll say on this because I got to get to a local amateur show out here. But with Andrew too, I'm trying to think what my point was. What was the last point you just made on Boo Boo? Because I was going to tie off of that, but I just got
he's different. He can do the things that you said he does, those wild punches and moving differently because he's that talented and he knows what's coming back,
Oh yeah, and I know it is because I was going to tie off that and say he hasn't made some of the greatest business decisions, so he's not. So it's partly his fault that he hasn't had some of these big fights, but also these guys haven't been jumping head over heels to sign the dotted line against him either. So that's why I do give Benavidez credit for taking this fight. He has a Canelo fight potentially in the distance, but he's not going to wait around and just hope he gets picked. He's going to take a fight like this, and if he beats Andrade, I think he rightfully so is that next guy in line. So. We'll save the pound for pound and the awards talk for another time because I don't want to just quickly go through that. I want it to give us our time to fully explain our picks so you guys aren't coming for our necks at some of the rankings we might have. But at the end of the day, this was a good show, quick show, but we wanted to get something in for you guys. So I want to wrap it up. I know you have something that you normally say. Do you want to give that spiel real quick before we wrap things up again?
Hey, look, man, go ahead, support your local fighters. Tell everybody that you know. If you can't get to these bigger events, there are plenty of local shows. A lot of them end up being either free or hella cheap. Go out and support your local fighters. Again, we talk about this all the time, right? Some of the biggest names in the world of boxing are, started in club shows. Me and Felix talked about this on the shop, earlier in the week. Ugas was down here in Tucson on a club show, right? Years later, the next thing you know, guess what? He's fighting Manny Pacquiao. Now he's on the Canelo undercard. This was a guy who was down here in a club show, getting paid, a pittance. Now he's on the biggest, stages, right? But he had to come down here and get that love and support and get, and pay his dues and get where he needs to go. So just because you don't know their names now doesn't mean you won't know them later or everybody won't know them later. Go out there, support your guys, even the guys who, like the Mickey Wards, the Toro Gottis, right? They were doing club shows forever before they became the legends that they are now. So go ahead and support that local boxing, MMA. These guys are out here fighting their asses off for your entertainment.
Yeah, that's a fact. And I'm going to follow your advice because I'm about to get off this right now and jet over to a local amateur show. We got the finals and a big tournament coming up. So we'll have some coverage on that for ITR. I believe the shop will be back Monday, and we should be back to our regular scheduled program Friday. We're going to have some fight news. I know Lee Wood, Josh Warrington are about to fight. Joe Smith and Zerto are going to fight. But most importantly, we got pound for pound, we got awards, all those kind of things. So we'll see you guys next Friday, we believe. Salute to you guys for tuning in. I know the schedule is kind of weird. It's a Saturday, but we will catch you guys, I believe, next Friday.
And stay tuned. We will be doing male and female pound for pound lists. Get everybody in there and give them their respect. And we appreciate you guys. Catch and counter. Stay fucking with us.
Yes, sir. You heard them. All right. We'll catch y'all. Peace.